The nice thing about this being not live radio is if you say something and you're like, ooh, that doesn't sound too good, can I restate that? Then I'll edit it and we'll clean it up in post-production, and it'll never get to the air.
Wow, you're much more generous than the media folks that I do interviews with. So that's
I imagine.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 494. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week this week. Thank you to all of those of you who are returning, who have listened before. Welcome aboard to all of you who are new. Glad to have you here. Hope you will go back and check out some of the 494 previous episodes, one of which we're going to talk about today. And thank you so much to the members of the Reformation Gun Club, the men and women who support the show through their monthly and annual contributions. If you would like to become one of them, if you would like to help keep the show going for as long as who knows? I mean, we're shooting for episode 500. We're counting down to episode 500. Who knows how long it will go after that? Only you can decide. Join us at reformationgunclub.com. Go to Give, Send, Go, which is our Christian-based crowdfunding partner, and look for Armed Lutheran Radio there. reformationgunclub.com will take you to our Give, Send, Go page where you can donate any amount, whatever the Spirit moves you to give. We are greatly appreciative of every penny, and we hope you will come and join the club. As we begin the serious countdown, we're getting right down to it now, the last 5 episodes before we hit episode 500. Friend of the show, Raymond Keating, was a longtime resident of Center Moriches, New York, and more recently of Davenport, Florida, and he unfortunately passed away on Saturday, July 11th. Raymond was 63. Keating was a gifted economist, a public policy expert. He had a bachelor's in science and business administration, master's of business administration in banking and finance, and a master of arts in economics. He had been publishing works in economics, spending 30 years of his career as a chief economist for the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council. He worked on Jack Kemp's presidential campaign. But beyond his work as an economist, Raymond had a vast array of experience and interests, and he wrapped all of those things up: his background in economics and government, his love of things like golf, baseball, Long Island, his background as a confessional Lutheran of the LCMS stripe, and he wove those all together into a series of fictional novels. And that started out as the Pastor Stephen Grant series. Pastor Stephen Grant, the main character in that series of books, was a Lutheran pastor from Long Island, a parish in Long Island, but he had a background as a former CIA agent, and his life as a pastor and his former life as a CIA agent sometimes overlapped, and that's what created these incredible books. Since then, he added Raymond Keating added a series called The Alliance of St. Michael, and had more recently published a thriller about the adventures of Agent Dean Cold, which no doubt was going to become an expanded series of books. And I'm sure the highlight of his illustrious career was his appearance on Armed Lutheran Radio. All kidding aside, I discovered Ray Keating's Stephen Grant series way back in the early years of the first 2 years of the podcast. And I was about 5 books in when Raymond kindly agreed to come on the show to discuss his background and where the series and the ideas in the series came from, his Lutheran faith. And shortly, I was, at the time, I think I was reading his book, Water into Wine. I think that's the 5th book in the series. Reagan Country was coming. And in this episode, Ray announced or let me know that was what was coming up and where he got the inspiration. I fell in love with these books, and I wanted to share them on the podcast. And in the years that followed, I shared these books with my mom, who, though not a Lutheran, fell in love with the books as well. I had sent her other books that I loved, other series that I really enjoyed, but the ones that she really enjoyed and resonated with her were the Pastor of Stephen Grant series. And I'm sure many others have enjoyed them as well. And if you have not, you should check them out. I will include in the show notes for this episode links to where you can get his books. And I had, like I said, I had the great honor to have Mr. Keating on the show in the 2nd season of this podcast, episode 81. So it's been a while. So what I wanted to do today is to share with you that original episode, that original interview with Ray Keating, unedited, which aired on August 6th, 2017. I hope you enjoy it. Sit back and enjoy the interview. It was a great, I really enjoyed talking to Raymond, picking his brain a little bit about the process of writing the books, the inspiration for the books and for the characters, some of the firearms that he chose in the books. And I will include links in the show notes where you can, if you have not heard of this series of books and would like to look into it, I will include links in the show notes at the end and tell you a little bit more when we close things out at the end of the interview. So sit back and relax and enjoy the show. Episode 81 with author Raymond Keating. Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Our special guest today is an economist, a columnist with RealClearMarkets.com. He's the former weekly columnist with Long Island Business News and Newsday. He's a former college professor, and his works appeared in places like the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, National Review. And you're probably wondering at this point what all this has to do with guns and God and Lutheranism. Well, it just so happens that our guest is also an author of 6 works of fiction, a series of action thrillers with a very unlikely hero, a Lutheran pastor named Stephen Grant. Ray Keating, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Thanks very much, Lloyd. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here. First, I just got to tell you, I'm a big fan of this genre of books. I'm a fan of Clancy and Vince Flynn's Mitch Rapp series, and of course Brad Thor. And the Pastor Stephen Grant series, I really think ranks among those in my among my favorite books. You're an economist by trade, which is interesting. But how did you get the idea to start writing a series of action thrillers?
Well, first, thank you very much for the nice comments, and the Tom Clancy one means a lot because that's kind of where I dipped my toe into thrillers was with Tom Clancy. So that's very nice of you to say. You're right. I'm an economist by trade. I've also been a newspaper columnist, now online columnist for more than 20 years, and I think every newspaper columnist believes they have a book in them, and I've done policy books, and my first 3 books all had by the numbers in the title, so I promised my wife that someday I would write a book that actually had words in it. And how this all came about was a person I work with, I've worked with her for many years, mentioned to me one day that just in passing, we're having a conversation, and she said, there's a new priest in my at my parish, and he used to be with the CIA. So I was like, well, that's really neat. So I kind of filed that away. said, if I ever write my novel, maybe I'll play around with that. And then you mentioned I was a columnist with Newsday on Long Island here. So I wrote a weekly column there for about 12 years. And lo and behold, at Hofstra University on Long Island, they were going to have a James Bond conference. Ooh. So I said to my editor, well, I have to go to the James Bond conference. And he said, sure, Ray, that sounds good. Off I went, and I found out that Ian Fleming was my age at the time when his first James Bond novel came out.
Oh.
So that was kind of the impetus. I finished...
All the stars aligned at that point.
That's right. I finished the column, sent it in, and then I decided to get started on these books. And I wrote Warrior Monk was the first one, and I did not think it was going to be a series going in. But it's turned out to be a wonderful journey, and it's very different from, my if you will, my full-time job of being an economist. I'm chief economist with a small business group for over 20 years. So there I do, a lot of policy analysis and writing on the economy. And then, as I said, I've been a newspaper/online columnist for many years. Writing a novel is completely different. It's just, to be honest with you, it's just a heck of a lot of fun. It's like taking a little vacation whenever I can, carve out the time to work on it. So it's been great.
Awesome. Well, I stumbled upon the books really by accident. I ran across them at Amazon. I read the description of Warrior Monk, and I was like, hey, that's interesting. I'd never seen that kind of a hero before. I thought, all right, let me give that a try. So I bought it. And I have to admit, it sat on my bookshelf for probably 2 months because I just didn't find the time to sit down and start reading fiction again. And then I finally found the time to read it, and I could not put it down. When I was finished, I immediately logged back onto Amazon and I ordered the rest of them. And I just finished Murderer's Row. I'm in the middle of about 4 chapters into the 6th one, Wine into Water. Start off with let's talk about Stephen Grant. I mean, you gave us the idea or an idea of where you got the idea for the character. He's really an unusual hero. So tell people a little bit about this guy.
Sure. He was a Navy SEAL, and then he went on to the CIA. He used his skills, as I say in the books, various times. He at various times he had a cubicle at the CIA at Langley, but he wasn't there very often because he was out in the field doing things.
Analyst in quotes.
That's right. Some people have referred to him as a CIA assassin. I have a friend of mine who was in, it's interesting. Well, I don't want to get off, but who you wind up talking to after you write a book or two along these lines. But a gentleman that I know was in Coast Guard intelligence always reminds me that we don't do assassinations in the United States. And then he proceeds to tell me all the nations that do. He said Israel, France, he gives me a long list. I said, yeah, I understand, but we're having fun with some fiction here. So so that was who he was. And then we pick up his life years later after he becomes a Lutheran pastor on Long Island. And, at various times in the books, I give a little bit here and there about, his moving from, one life to the other. The whole idea, well, not the whole, but a big part of the books is that, he thought he left that old life behind, but
right.
In Warrior Monk, it revisits, and then we get to see it revisited in different ways in the following novels. But I've often told people when they say, give me one line as to what this is, it's like, well, think of James Bond as your priest or pastor or something like that.
Right.
But so it's as I said, it's enjoyable to write because I'm telling a thriller, adventure, murder, guns, all sorts of things. I work in some theology here and there, and hopefully not in a hitch over the head kind of way. And I work hard to kind of make, the dialogue natural, and hopefully the characters, I know when I pick up a book, watch a movie, television show, I want to like the characters on some level. I mean, there are, a few examples, I suppose, of things that, like The Godfather, I suppose. I've watched The Godfather and like anybody, but I still watched it.
Right.
But you want to, I like it when you have characters that you can enjoy on various levels. So the characters have been great, dreaming them up, their various interests, obviously the relationship between all of them, and just bringing those, that CIA life primarily into his current life as a pastor. And actually in the next novel that's coming out, which carries the title Lionhearts, I actually go back into his Navy SEAL days a little bit. So it's, but, I always tell people, as long as somebody out there continues to enjoy reading it, then I'll keep writing it, because it's just a heck of a lot of fun.
It certainly is. Would I be going out on a limb here to guess that what is your association with Lutheranism? Because you get the doctrinal and the liturgical stuff absolutely right in these books. And I saw at the end of, I guess it was Murderer's Row, where you gave some credit to someone for kind of helping you with the theological stuff. But from the hymns to the prayers and Grant's sermons and the way he explains the Lutheran confessions to non-Lutheran friends, it's really remarkable. And the way you weave it into the story in a very natural way.
Well, I appreciate that, and weaving it in a natural way is really critical to me. But my own background, I'm a LCMS, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Lutheran. Is that repetitive? I guess. And actually, I grew up Roman Catholic and wound up in my young days, in the early 20s, becoming a Lutheran. And I've been very fortunate on that front to have some wonderful pastors that have just, helped guide me along the way, teach me, and so on. And then also I've been very active in the church in terms of church council and district conventions. And I went to the 2010 Lutheran Church Missouri Synod National Convention. So I've always been very active in the church as best I can, given everything else going on in life. And my son, actually, my oldest son, is studying to become an LCMS pastor. So it's very rich in our, it's very much in our lives in a very real and substantive way. So hopefully that the key with that, sometimes when you get into the Christian fiction genre, sometimes the theology, quite frankly, sometimes gets a little dicey at times. But also, I find there's and not with all of them, there are some wonderful writers, but there tends to be, some wooden characters, stilted dialogue, and I try to not make that mistake. I mean, not to say that I, don't slip into all sorts of problems, and obviously you do the best you can, but I try to be cognizant of those issues. And then, the other issue here is when I was writing for Newsday in particular, I had great freedom in whatever I wanted to write on each week, as long as it's somehow or another, I could tie it back to Long Island. I could write about it. So it was very interesting, because I wrote on religious issues a lot. And I was able to interview a whole host of pastors and priests and get to know them, I think at a different level. Sit down in a diner with them and chat about things. And so in addition to my LCMS pastors, if you will, I was able to talk to a whole host of other pastors and priests and so on, and really get some interesting takes. And, one of the things that in the books, Stephen Grant's two closest friends these days are, one is a Catholic priest and one is an Anglican priest. And I did that on purpose for a variety of reasons, but there is this, we all know the challenge in the culture right now, and there is something to be said where we can work together in the public arena, in terms of traditional Christians across denominations. That's a good thing, and these guys are interesting. They're ecumenical, but not in that kind of stale way that you think about it, where everybody just gives up on all their beliefs and just, it's a big hug. They have their differences. They know that. But they're also very good friends, and they meet on a regular basis, and they do devotional reading, and then they kind of hash out a whole host of things and just enjoy each other's company. So that came from my experience as a newspaper columnist.
That's fantastic. That explains a great deal, because the interaction between those three characters, Grant and the two other priests, is phenomenal. It's really fun, to the way they pick at each other and the way they talk to each other, and there's never any animosity about their difference of belief. It's tremendous. And it feels so natural, these three friends sitting down talking, or getting together for dinner, or having a barbecue, or sitting down, like you said, at a diner and going through devotions and eating breakfast. That brings up a question I was thinking of. Now the story, or the main characters are based in Long Island, and I don't have any knowledge of Long Island at all. I was born in New York City, but I was 2 when I left, so I have no.
You were smart. You got out. No.
So Grant is the pastor of an LCMS church, St. Mary's Lutheran Church in Manorville. Does St. Mary's exist? Do these fictional places have a basis in some place that you've been, or some real place?
Yes, and again, I think the St. Mary's. I've had questions about people. What's the name of the St. Mary's Lutheran Church? And some people are very outraged by it, and other people are like, oh. So there actually, I believe, are 1 or 2 St. Mary's Lutheran churches in America. But I kind of did that it was kind of like that little part of me, my personality, where it's like, certain Lutherans just don't know what to do with Mary, so let's make it St. Mary's Lutheran Church. So that's kind of that little side of my personality, I guess. But in terms of, for example, the Anglican Church, Father Tom Stone, he moved his church out of, and I don't want listeners to get the idea that this is what this is all about. This is kind of the stuff that I work in to tell you who these people are, and hopefully make them interesting and so on. But he moved his church out of the Episcopal Church, his parish, for a whole host of reasons in terms of where the Episcopal Church went and went into the Anglican Church in North America. Now, I actually met a couple of Anglican priests that did that in the New York area. And quite frankly, in New York, that's pretty rare.
Right.
Putting New York in perspective on the grand, scheme of philosophy and outlook. But there have been a couple, and I met them, actually 3 of them. And so that kind of gave me, a little background in terms of doing that. So it's, a lot of this is, like any writer, I think, you pick and choose, your experiences, and then other stuff is just, fun to make up. But yeah, I think those characters come out of that experience that I had, as I said, with writing that newspaper column and being fortunate enough to write on Christian/religious issues on a regular basis.
Right. And so, and each of your books has not only a tense and exciting plot, as you would expect from an action thriller, with lots of twists and action and violence and sex and betrayal and all the stuff that makes these novels great, but you also build around broader cultural themes that the church and society are dealing with today. One of the reviews on the cover of your book says, these stories could be ripped from today's headlines. You're talking about greed and mega churches and government spending and eminent domain, religious freedom, and all these things, and lots of course, lots of the bad guys are happen to be liberals.
Really?
And, yeah, shocking that. But unlike, I compared your books to Thor and Flynn and Clancy, but unlike those authors, you're making conservative arguments and you're making cultural observations that they typically don't do, talking about real issues, in some cases central to the plot, in others sort of tangential.
Right.
But you do it in such a way that it feels perfectly natural. You learn something, and you don't, Like, for example, one of the things that I found really fascinating was this. I want to talk about this character in a minute. Is Pastor Grant's wife, but you have these situations where, for example, she's an economist. She goes and she speaks before Congress, and there's an interview that she does on the radio in Long Island, and there are other places like the sermons, for example, that Pastor Grant gives, where instead of just saying, and he gave a stirring, homily at Zach's wedding, you actually spell it out. You actually provide those prayers and those sermons and the interviews, and they're filled with facts, and they're filled with excellent lessons about Lutheran theology, about Christianity, about life, that a lot of those other authors don't give you that kind of context. So you don't get the same, like you were talking about earlier, you get to know these characters and know who they are and how they tick, and you start to care about them in a way that you don't do with the characters in these other thrillers.
Well, again, I appreciate that, and I hope that is what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to. It's always you always have to be careful with when you're writing a book like this. What's your I want to first off, I want to tell hopefully a fun story, an interesting story. Mm-hmm. I want to bring some characters, as I said, to the table that people will care about or be interested in. You can hate the bad guys, certainly. And then say some things along the way. And that's what you're talking about. And it's, you always have to be careful. How far do you go? How do you say it? In the next book, Lionhearts, I'm dealing with, I'm not giving away too much because I put the cover up on Facebook already and on the website, but dealing with Islamic terrorism and at home here in the United States, and I get into some of the history of that, but it's very difficult. How do you do that without suddenly writing in like an Ayn Rand 30-page rant or something?
Right.
So I do it with this one character that I introduce. I do it through media interviews with this person that's a television reporter who's never heard this perspective on the issue. So she keeps asking questions, then comes back later and so on. So it's always that challenge to how are you going to do it without, hitting people over the head with a 2x4. So
right.
that's the thing. And, there was one, I think it was on Goodreads. Somebody wrote a review, and I just love it because it was a guy that clearly does not align with any of the views put forth by Stephen Grant or his friends. And he wrote, "I should hate this, but I love it, and I keep reading it." So I was like, "That's wonderful." That to me was one of the best reviews I ever got. So that was
right.
That was fun to read something like that. And again, I understand. There's a temptation, right? I mean, I like Tom Clancy and Brad Thor and Vince Flynn and all those guys, but, people have said to me, well, do you ever think about going down that path? I said, well, sure, I've thought about it, and who knows, maybe I'll, something totally different, if I have the opportunity one day. But really, I came to doing this for a reason that I to get across a variety of ideas, and quite frankly, just to get across the idea that, hey, look, here we are, Christians, it's almost like what I think movies and things used to be a long time ago, where it was just kind of, hey, look, here are Christians, and they're good folks, and they're your neighbors, and,
Right, exactly.
As opposed to some of the stuff that we get fed today. So, the purpose is there to make, listen, I made him a Lutheran pastor for a reason. Mm-hmm. And hopefully, people can take something away from it. Whether it's just I enjoyed those novels or listen, there's some interesting points raised here, and maybe I can, think about it a little bit more. So that's.
And I love the characters, and that's it. You hit on something there that I hadn't thought about. That's exactly. I think that's what I like so much about this. You have actually the main characters in these books are normal, wholesome people. Your hero is not sort of this broken, conflicted sort of, the kind of people you find in some of these other books and movies. He's truly a good person, but at the same time, he deals with the kinds of struggles and anxieties that everybody does, even as a pastor. And And I think that's what makes the character so endearing. You really get a feeling for who these people are and what motivates them. And it's not, and even I think you do a great job with the making us hate the bad guys because they're so well developed as well. But I was actually tearing up in the middle of Murderer's Row as characters were getting whacked. That was a hard book to read, and there's a tremendous scene I wanted to ask you about that's in the river. That's the fourth book, is that right?
Yes.
The scene it's almost a sort of an image of Christ kind of scene where you've got Pastor Grant, and he's teamed up with some of his former CIA friends to find a bad guy. And I'm not going to give away any of the plot here, but this person has done something really bad. He's caught up with the bad guy, and he is struggling with that desire to exact revenge.
Right.
To pull the trigger, and someone else does it for him.
Right.
And then he deals, the rest of that book, he is torn dealing with the guilt that someone else took that burden off of him. It's really an amazing scene, and an amazing, the way you wrote that. I loved it. It was fantastic, and it really moved me in a way that none of those other authors has ever been able to do.
Well, I appreciate that. You summed it up. That's what I was trying to do, and the fact that it came through is great. And that's something actually that struggle. I mention it not in a big way, but in passing or in a couple of pages in the next book that's coming out, because that's something that, it's one of those things that we all struggle with, right? We're saints and sinners, right. And he as a pastor knows he's forgiven, but there's still something there because again, I don't want to give too much away, but the fact that it's a struggle for him because he is sorry, but he knows that he's like, well, if I was put in that situation again with those exact same circumstances, what would I do? And those are things that we all struggle with, and obviously at various levels. But that with Stephen Grant in particular, because he's really the only character, with a few exceptions here and there, where I go inside his head, so his thoughts. And I grew up, as I said, Roman Catholic, and I don't hate the Catholic Church today in any way, shape, or form. It's just that it made sense to me to go where I am now.
Right.
But growing up, there was always this, the priest was like, the priest was super holy, and that type of thing. And that's not, the reality of life. And I think obviously if you talk to most priests today, they'll tell you that's not the reality. But that was what we were taught, or the perception, or however you want to put it. But I wanted to, get across the point that, the pastor struggles with this just like the rest of us. And that's been, some of the best sermons I've ever heard. And most are those sermons where, the pastor makes that clear. It's like, hey, I'm right in the trenches there with you, struggling with these things. So,
yep.
And I tried to do that various times in the book. But I appreciate your comment. There are a few, as a writer, there are a few things, that scene, and there are a few other ones along the way where you're like, well, look at that, I got something right there. So, thank you, Lord, for the help on that.
For those who think, we've talked about it, the pastor's a main character, this just can't be, this can't be good. The language in the books, the violence, the sex, it's not gratuitous. It's all very realistic. There's adultery, there's drug use, there's murder, there's terrorism, torture, and the language is not sanitized. It's all real life, and it's not some Hallmark sanitized, version of life.
Yeah, I get in trouble sometimes for that.
Well, I start to say, is there a conscious effort there's a fine line there where you're trying to, I don't want to make it too gratuitous, but I don't want it to be, too goody-goody.
Right. And that's the struggle. You nailed it. It's, I'm sorry, but listen, of all, we all struggle with many things. And I know, especially when I'm tired or aggravated and so on, one of the things I struggle with is language, quite frankly. So that's, so I think that's part of life. Now, maybe that's just me being a New Yorker. I don't know. There's so much of it around. But yeah, so it's the balance, right? You don't want to go, you certainly don't want to go into the gratuitous area with any of this. And I hope any of the violence, the language, it's there for a purpose. It's not just, I don't believe in the idea of, it's like once the Hays Code went away in Hollywood, they were like, well, let's just have fun and do whatever we want. And let's see how we can shock people,
Right. And F-bomb every other word.
Right, exactly. But still, I do sprinkle those things in there in an attempt to make it seem more real life, that this is how these people act. And I'll tell you, I get people, and I know I'm going to get it. Most people kind of appreciate it, but there are a few people that are like, oh, it's, can't read this because of the bad language. I'm like, okay, well, sorry, I guess that's all I could say. But there are other things. I'm an economist. There are other things out there in the marketplace, so you can find something else.
And there's one of the fun interactions, the character interactions, is his interaction with his former partner and, as it turns out, former lover, Paige Caldwell, who was with him in the CIA,
right.
And she doesn't really get his new vocation, does she?
She does not. She does and she doesn't. There are various times where along the way, for the most part, she doesn't. And you see that in Warrior Monk, the first book. But there are little moments where Paige Caldwell, does something, and Stephen's even a little surprised by it. He knows her so well. But yeah, she's a fun character to write. She just really is. Actually, it's funny, when the book first came out, my oldest son was in high school, and one of his friends read it when Warrior Monk came out, and his comment was, and keep in mind, this is a high school kid. He goes, that Paige Caldwell, she's a floozy. And I was like, did he really use the word floozy? It's like, what year is this? But she's great fun, and they know each other very well. It sets up an interesting dynamic in terms of, they have this relationship. She comes back into his life because of the CIA and a whole host of reasons. And there's a new relationship. It's a completely different relationship. It's platonic. I don't think we're into book 6. So, Stephen Grant gets married in one of the books. And
right.
So there is still that little, when you go to Stephen's mind, there are moments where his wife is together with Paige Caldwell, and he's like, this is weird. I'm not really comfortable with this. But they understand, I think, what their relationship is now. And it's very much, he still trusts her, and she trusts him because of what they went through in terms of, things at the CIA and basically having each other's back and so on. And she does some, things that perhaps, when you first meet Paige Caldwell later on, you wouldn't expect it. But and there's some, from book to book, there's some development going on with her as well. She's not in, book 6 and forthcoming book 7, the same exact person as she was in the first one. So
right. So there's also a lot of gunplay in these books, and Pastor Grant has a gun safe in his office at his church, which I found yes. interesting. And his of course his excuse was that having them close by so that he doesn't have to run back to the house to get his guns to go to the range. But it comes in handy in the first book, and he keeps, what is it, a 10 millimeter Glock 20,
right?
A Harris M89 sniper rifle, which I found quite interesting. But the one that I really was puzzled by was the Taurus PT-25. That one surprised me. It's a deep cover gun, obviously. It's very small.
Right.
Why Taurus as opposed to the Beretta versions?
Oh, my goodness. Well, see, this has been a learning process for me. This is the research area. First off, I'll give you a little background. I have, I'm an NRA member.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I've written on the Second Amendment many, many times over the years. In fact, going back many years, I did a project with the NRA and did some writing for them. So that's me in terms of my views. But I've only had, and it's been more recent that it's kind of come back in, but very actually limited hands-on experience, if you will, with guns.
Right.
When I was very young, my father was an armored car guard. He was an armored car driver. That's what he did. So
Oh.
during summers, during college, I would do that. That was, so it's kind of funny. I'm a free market economist, and every once in a while I'll tell people I was a card-carrying member of the Teamsters, and they're just like, "What are you doing?" But so I had a little gun training there.
Mm-hmm.
And then really when my oldest son got into Boy Scouts and just kind of doing archery and some of just the air guns and things like that, just got me, I was like, this target sport stuff is fascinating. I mean, I'm a golfer as well. That's what when I have time, that's what I love to do the most.
Mm-hmm.
So, but all of that kind of came together. And then once I'm thinking about this and, playing around with the idea of James Bond as your pastor, well, then obviously you've got to get your act together, Keating, and at least do some research here. So that's what I did, and not just the guns, but also, Black Hawk helicopters and so on. I just, I guess as a writer and a newspaper person, that type of research fascinates me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I decided on the Glock for Stephen and actually for the rest of his former CIA close people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just kind of looking at it and seeing what law enforcement had used in the past and so on and so on. You mentioned the Taurus PT-25 and, undercover gun. And I was like, well, you know what? That would make sense in terms of his background and what he did before. So went with that. And, he is a marksman in terms of being a, sniper and so on. So those are all things that, it was just me doing research and coming up with. And what's been great, I started to mention earlier, as people read these books, I hear from, just very interesting individuals. A lot, not on the guns exactly. I mean, on the gun front, I get a lot of advice and
Right.
input, but also just people. The most interesting has been, and I know I'm taking this to a different area, but the idea that there are people out there that took the path that Stephen Grant took. I got an email once when War Among first came out, and all it said was, "I am Stephen Grant." So I was like, well, that's interesting. So I said, what does that mean? So I struck up this email conversation with this pastor who was with the CIA. And he left the CIA to become a pastor. He told me about his exit interview. And he asked them on the way out, I guess this is pretty strange for somebody to leave the CIA to become a pastor. And the person's response was interesting. He said, well, it certainly doesn't happen every day, but it's not completely unusual because when we hire people in the first place, we want them to have a certain moral anchor. I don't know if that was the phrase that they used, but that they can, rely upon when put in various situations and so on. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then there was a pastor that sent me an email and noted that his father was in the OSS, the CIA precursor in World War II, then went on to the CIA, and then, in the mid-50s became a pastor. So I've talked to former Army Rangers, FBI, law enforcement. It's really been fascinating to see how many people have kind of gone this path. So it's not completely unusual, I guess.
Very cool. Now, you even work in some church council intrigue into the story at times, and having served, you mentioned that you'd served in your church. I was formerly president of the congregation at one of my former churches, and I found that really entertaining, some of the back and forth in the meetings. And you've got the orthodoxy lady, the doctrinal watchdog lady, and
I think every church has one of those.
Every church has one, and then there's the guy who objects to the pastor's lifestyle and his income, and I was like, I've seen this before. This is
Yep, so did I. So that made it into the book. And it's people are people, and it's just kind of fascinating to see that. But I have discovered over the years that there are every once in a while that's like somebody fills a slot. You know what I mean? It's like that slot has to be filled by somebody, and that person's going to do it.
Every church has the doctrinal watchdog, and there's somebody who's going to step up and fill that role.
I have to tell you real quick. It was a funny story. That one church going back a number of years, I wrote a column about whatever it was, and it had to do with, I can't even remember the topic, LCMS, but somebody went off the beam saying, like, I think a sermon on, like, global warming or something. And I was like, suddenly I was like, well, what church am I in here? What's going on? And it wound up as a column. And she was just like, I was so glad to read that column. I was like, I bet you were.
Yep. Oh my goodness. Speaking of the church council, there's one guy that comes to mind that I'm intrigued by, this Sean McEnany guy. He's been in, I'm 5 books in, starting into the 6th, and I still don't have a really good handle on this guy. He's an intelligence guy, but he's a family man. And how did he end up at St. Mary's? He is a very unique character. I did not expect.
Yeah, he's again a fun character to write. Because he is so mysterious, and and he is that. It's not like, Stephen Grant was with the CIA. Now he's a pastor, and not through anything that necessarily he was doing, but his old life is back. Mm-hmm. John McEnany's like, he's in both worlds, and he's fine with it. He's got the suburban home with the wife and kids, but yet he's working for this company that's basically part CIA front company, and then he gets involved with other folks from Stephen's past who wind up setting up this security firm, if you will, that carries over into subsequent books. But he's just great because people don't know what to do with him, and I just have great because it's like he gets knowledge, he gets information, and I love having the FBI frustrated by the fact that this guy is getting information that they don't have, and the CIA is kind of the same way. So he's in the CIA, but he's not. And he's just and he does things that Stephen Grant certainly would not do.
Right.
And he's very very clear in what he thinks needs to be done, and will do whatever he deems necessary. So,
and he's driving around in a minivan with
right. That was, with the juice boxes. Yeah, there's one scene where I couldn't resist. It was like, they were making, his coworkers were making fun of him. It's like, here's this guy that has, contacts all over the world and so on. He shows up with a minivan with juice boxes in the back. So
right.
But you know what? That's life, though, isn't it? I mean, it's the notion that. All the people at the CIA are single and don't go home to a family is ridiculous.
And completely buttoned down and totally,
Right.
It was great. So let's see. There was another question I wanted to ask you. Oh yes. Having a few pastor friends of my own, and I found this interesting as the books go along. St. Mary's holds services on several services on Sunday. They've got matins twice a week. They got vespers on Wednesday, and somehow Pastor Grant is still able to write sermons in lickety split, officiate, save the world.
That's right. There have been a couple of reviewers that have said it's like amazing. How does this guy do it? I'm like, well, it is fictional,
right?
But yeah, no, it's yes, and that's kind of, I guess, me as a parishioner. I'm like, why don't we have more services? I want a midweek service.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, it's very much and even then I had to, in a certain sense, part of the most difficult thing is like, okay, how do I get him? He's still a pastor, obviously. That's what he's doing. But how do I all of a sudden get him off on this adventure,
right?
And with people believing it and saying, "All right, that works for me." So I did bring in a assistant pastor in the second book, Zach Carmichael, a younger guy just out of seminary, and that kind of helps a little bit, in terms of some of that stuff,
right?
But yeah, and there are times where I recognize that, and I have a parishioner kind of tweak him and give him a tough time because inevitably that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's having fun with it, but trying to keep it that people say, well, that's just wacky. Why would that so you can't do that. But and that's the thing that people would latch on to, right? They'd be like, well, he's never at his church.
Right.
And sometimes, like, my wife is my editor. She's the English major, as I like to say. So she's been a tremendous help in this. And reining me in certain places and things like that, but she'll remind me of things along those lines, and so we keep that all kind of straight and believable.
So where did you get the idea? Speaking of wives, where did you get the idea for Jennifer Breeze, who would later become Jennifer Grant? She's an economist, right up your alley, and
Right.
she testifies before Congress, and she does interviews, which I really love, because you're teaching things at the same time, instead of just saying, passing, mentioning in passing her testimony,
Right.
or her interviews, which I thought were great. Is there a little bit of I would assume there's a little bit of you in Jennifer Grant?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what I do for a living. So that, I've testified before Congress now, I don't know, like 24 times or something like that, and I do radio and television interviews all the time. I got into it with Tucker Carlson recently. I'm like, wait a second, Tucker, I'm a conservative. What are you picking on me for? but but yeah, so that's what I do, as the main gig, if you will. So that was, being able to bring in a character like that and have her do things like that. And, that's my firsthand experience. So those things actually do happen.
So she's Ray Keating in a dress?
Yeah. There's a little bit, to be honest, people have asked that. I said, well, there's the economist in me is, Jennifer Grant. I said, there's certain parts of Stephen Grant that definitely are me, not the, fit guy doing all the action stuff. And then there's Tom Stone, who's the father, Father Tom Stone, who's the Anglican priest, who's his thing is, he's a very traditional Christian, traditional Anglican. But when he's off duty, I always point out that if the temperature's over 60 degrees, he has shorts and a Hawaiian shirt on. And he's got a very good sense of humor and so on. And that's part me, and my wife tries to make me not wear Hawaiian shirts. But there's a mix there in terms of, where I kind of wind up, little slivers of me throughout the book.
I love that character, and I love his interactions with the Catholic priest, and they're picking at each other back and forth over meals or at the golf course.
Right.
And
so Father McDermott, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and they seem to be opposites. And I make that point, because Tom Stone is very easygoing, quick laugh, and then, Father McDermott's kind of more, he comes across, especially initially, very kind of stern and by the book and so on. But and they do that. Their personalities, you think they clash, but they don't. This is just, kind of a guy thing, if you will. That was one of, it's funny, I mentioned my wife's the main editor. I had to convince her of some of those things, as much as she's been married to me for almost 30 years and we have 2 boys, I still had to convince her, no, this is how guys actually talk. It's okay.
This is perfectly normal.
Right. This is what we do when women aren't around.
If we're not making fun of each other, we don't like each other.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
There was the scene where they're in Murderer's Row, your 5th book, where Jennifer is helping this family whose land is being threatened by eminent domain, and they own a restaurant. I want to know if that restaurant exists, because the food that you mentioned on their menu sounds amazing.
That restaurant doesn't. But well, I can't, there are bits of pieces of restaurants around here that I kind of brought together in that, but there are other ones that do. I mentioned, I give them a plug. There's a restaurant I mentioned, Buckley's, in the town that they live in, and that certainly exists. The lobster roll out in Montauk is one of my favorite places to go during the summer. So there's certainly one. There's also oh my goodness, the name just went out of my head. There's a diner. Wow, shame on me. Well, there's another one that actually exists, but it's kind of an old-timey restaurant with the 1950s diner, neon light type of thing. So
the diner where they eat and have their devotions.
Well, that diner is, that one is one I frequent fairly often with my family. So that does exist as well. And there are other ones that, when they go to kind of special places that do exist. So, but that one in particular, I kind of made up, but it was an amalgam of other restaurants. So
right.
But that, that's another. See, when we talk about these issues that I bring up, one of the, these are things that I've written on and worked on. When you talk about eminent domain and religious liberty, the economic stuff. So I've written on this stuff in either a public policy way, testifying before Congress or writing newspaper columns. So what I'm trying to do when I bring these up is bring the points across, but in a way where it's to show why it matters to people in their lives, right? So rather than just having some dry thing about eminent domain and taking land from people to give to other private entities and so on, here's the couple that's living through it, their family, and what's happening to them. And that's the reality of these issues. Sometimes as an economist, I get caught up in numbers and things like that and trends.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all important. But you have to also, especially, quite frankly, when you're dealing with Congress, if you can tell the story of somebody and tell them what's happening in terms of something good or something very problematic or bad, that makes a real difference. And obviously, readers for novels aren't looking to, read a policy paper. They want to be entertained by a good story. So but if I can do that in a way where, you make these issues very personal and people can think about, well, you know what, here's this in this story, but, in real life, this is going on and this is going on. So,
yeah. Now you've got lots of positive reviews of the books, but naturally there are some, shall we say, liberal Lutherans who don't think a whole lot of Pastor Stephen Grant's adventures or his positions on certain issues. Particularly, I ran across this review from, I think it was Luther Seminary, which is the ELCA, of course, and he's complaining that it sounds like it could have been written by the NRA, and
yeah, I know the review you're talking about, and it's quite a lengthy review. I mean, that guy put a lot of time into that. It's like, my goodness. And there's actually one paragraph in that review where I know he didn't mean it this way, but it's like, I'm going to pull that paragraph out someday and use it, because quite frankly, that paragraph is just marvelous. He does this description, and I know he doesn't mean it in a way, but he writes it in kind of a somewhat amusing way, where if you just read that paragraph, you'd think oh, well, I'm going to pick up those books.
Exactly. Well, there was this, and I actually pulled out one of his quotes because I wanted to get your thoughts on this, because it sounds like something that Pastor Bennett and I would go and just tear to pieces in our Clinging to God and Guns segment. But he says, what are we to make of the hero, Pastor Stephen Grant, the author's image of the perfect pastor? First of all, he's a firm believer in the lex talionis, and I didn't look that up, and it's Latin for something, law of something. Bad guys should get what they deserve 10 times over, and we good guys get to mete it out no matter what Jesus says about retaliation. And that just...
Yeah, it's, listen, I always tell people, when I have my little, when we have a discussion at church or something, not me telling people, but what I kind of bring up is, Jesus will forgive us for anything. If we go to him and say, and it's mind blowing actually when you think about it, when you really start to think about that, you're like, oh my goodness, anything. But yes, but it doesn't wipe out the consequences on this earth. It doesn't mean that, everything, then the consequences of your actions here and now just go away. Mm-hmm. So if you confess your sins, which is wonderful, and if you do it in prison when you're in a triple life sentence, that doesn't mean your triple life sentence gets to go away. So
just the eternal one.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. And and the Lord gave government the power of the sword, right? And that's so you can't but that's kind of classic, kind of what I would expect. But there was so it is what it is. But I still love the one paragraph where someday I'm going to pull it out and just slap it on something. It'll probably drive them crazy.
Yep. So what, as a Lutheran, as an LCMS Lutheran, give us kind of your view on gun rights and how they fit into a Christian worldview. I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast quite a bit, but how does that? What is your view on this, and your thoughts on gun rights from a Christian perspective?
Sure. Well, I don't know if I've actually ever been asked the question that way before, but
awesome.
The bottom line is, anything, a gun, there's that old joke where it's like, you hear this a lot lately. Well, gun violence took,
right.
People died as a result of gun violence. Like, and the old joke is like the gun got up and, did all these horrible things without any humans attached. So, a gun is a tool, right? And it could be used for hunting and for sport, and it could be used to protect your family and your friends and so on, and it can be used for evil. So that's how I come at it. So that's number one. After that, and to understand, I think, it's critical, and I think Lutherans get it on human nature better than most other people and most other Christians, right?
I agree.
The sinful nature of sinful aspects of human nature. So that means, quite frankly, you would be irresponsible in a sense that, if you put yourself in danger and not have some sort of protection. So you have to just understand human nature for what it is. And, this world is not perfect. It's fallen. So the idea that people choose to arm themselves for self-defense and they are law-abiding individuals, why should that be a problem for anybody, quite frankly?
Right.
And I don't think in any way, shape, or form that contradicts Scripture in terms of what I've been taught. There's the point about, Jesus didn't tell the centurion, right, to stop being a soldier and so on. So, it's to me, it's really a stretch but it's, people are doing it,
Right.
to say that somehow or another a Christian can't support or shouldn't support the Second Amendment. I think it's a naive view it's not only a naive view of human nature, but it's just dead wrong if you understand Holy Scripture and what, who we are, saints and sinners, and why we need Jesus in the end, right?
Exactly. Yep. So what is next for Pastor Stephen Grant? Now we talked a little bit earlier about Lionheart's coming out. When is the book coming out? And can you give us kind of a little brief flavor of what the story is about in Lionhearts?
Sure. It's barring, and I keep, in life, I always have to put the, barring anything blowing up in my face with this stuff. It should be out this month. Now, I can't tell you exactly when.
Fantastic.
But it should be out this month. And the idea is that, I put on the back of the book, it's war and terrorism on American soil. There are new tactics that we really haven't seen before, but that line up with the history of, if you want to say, Islamic radicalism.
Right.
So that's what we're being confronted with. There's the first several chapters of the book are, I think, different from the previous ones in terms of what's happening. And Pastor Grant is obviously back with he's in a situation where he has to make sure his church and his wife are protected, his family, his friends, but he also has a clear reason to be, if you will, out in the midst of this fight. And things are, I don't want to, this is very much we've seen in the Middle East Islamic attacks on Christians, and it's been horrible and horrifying. And I kind of take that and say, okay, what happens? I mean, we've had our attacks here, obviously, but what happens if you have a concerted effort along those lines in this country? So that's kind of what we're dealing with. So we have Pastor Grant and his family and friends, his church. We have that group that he's worked with, his former colleagues with the CIA. We also, as I mentioned early on, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but he actually dips back into his life as a Navy SEAL. I do that for the first time. And then there's the political comes it back in a way that I don't think we've really kind of seen since perhaps going back to Root of All Evil or Warrior Monk, where there's a national aspect to this story as well. So we're in the upper echelons of political power as well. So hopefully, but as I said on the book cover, it's kind of this. It's a war of it's flesh and blood, it's ideas, it's history, and it's beliefs, and that's kind of what we're wrestling with in this book, and hopefully people like it.
Sounds great. I cannot wait. Where can listeners go to find out more about you, about the series, and where can they go to order your books?
Sure. PastorStephenGrant.com is the website. And you can link there to, we have a Facebook. I'm very active on Facebook, so it's Facebook.com/Pastor Stephen Grant Novels, at Rev Grant on Twitter. Now you can get the books at Amazon, paperback and Kindle versions. There's a sale actually right now on the Kindle version. I am a business guy, so I will.
That's great.
And also you can get signed copies at raykeatingonline.com. So you can go over there and order signed copies. And the advance sales for Lionhearts are not up yet, but once they're up, you'll be able to order the Kindle version, and you'll be able to order the signed copies in advance. So all those things are kind of happening right now. We're getting them all lined up.
Fantastic. Ray Keating is an economist and author of the Pastor Stephen Grant novels, available at pastorstephengrant.com, or you can find them at amazon.com. I'll have links to all of them in the show notes. Ray, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoy it.
Oh, Lloyd, this has been great fun. I appreciate it.
All right. And we're out. That was awesome.
That was fun. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
I was not kidding when I said I love the books, and I'm excited that the new one's coming out sometime this month. But by the time I finish Wine into Water, I'll be ready for another Stephen Grant adventure.
I'll give you a little secret. I'm working on the one after that already, and that's going to be called tentatively Reagan Country. Because I went to the Reagan Library recently on a work thing, on an economics thing.
Right.
I had never been out there before to the Reagan Library. And I was there for 2.5 days. And just a story came to me while I was there, and I was like, that's going to be fun. So that'll be the one after this. So
fantastic. All right. Well, I am looking forward to it.
All right. And I appreciate it again. This is great fun.
All right, folks, that is going to wrap it up for this week for episode 494. If you would please keep the family of Raymond Keating, his son David, his wife, David's wife Michaela, his son Jonathan, his grandchildren, his nephew, all the Keating family, keep them in your prayers. A funeral service is going to be held Saturday, August 15th. At 1 p.m., this will be at St. John Lutheran Church in Sayville, New York. Burial will follow the service. And if you can't attend, in lieu of flowers, memorial donations may be made to St. Mark Lutheran Church in North Tonawanda, New York, where Raymond's son David serves as pastor. And donations may be made at www.stmarknt. It's stmarknt.org/donate, or just don't have to try to remember it. I'll put links in the show notes to the obituary for Mr. Keating, to the link where you can donate, and links to all of his books. I hope you will check all of that out and donate or attend the funeral if you can, as you feel moved to do so. But definitely keep the Keating family in your prayers. All right, thank you all for listening. Thank you for indulging me with this walk through down memory lane from 2017. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing it originally, and as much as I enjoyed sort of reminiscing, putting this episode together. Thank you all for joining me again. Until we get together next week for the next episode in our countdown to episode 500, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback, or a review on iTunes, and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.